My name is Iris Rhodes, 32 years old. The satin of my wedding dress whispered against the painted wood of the garden doors as I pressed my fingers to the cool surface, peering through the narrow crack at the rows of white chairs on the emerald lawn. The scene looked like a page from a bridal magazine. Glistening glassware on linen-draped tables, roses climbing trellises, sunlight filtering through like a blessing. But my eyes didn't linger on any of that. They went straight to the front row. Two empty chairs tied with satin ribbons and decorated with small bouquets of lilies. The seats where my parents should have been. The sight was a punch to the chest. For a second, I couldn't breathe. Behind me, I could hear guests shifting in their chairs, the low murmur of whispers moving through the garden like wind through tall grass. Where are her parents? Did something happen? I thought they were just running late. The string quartet finished their piece, the last notes hanging in the air, like a question no one wanted to answer. I closed my eyes and inhaled carefully, trying not to cry. Not after the 40 minutes I'd spent on this makeup, not after the years I'd spent pretending it didn't hurt to be second place in my own family. Morgan's face flashed into my mind, illuminated by the glossy sheen of magazine pages. My younger sister, the beautiful one, the one whose smile lived above the fireplace in a heavy silver frame. I was 16 the day I brought home my state computer science competition trophy, heart pounding with pride, fingers still ink-smudged from debugging code at the last minute. "That's nice, sweetheart," Dad had said, barely glancing up from his newspaper. Then, without missing a beat, he called out, "Carol, did you see Morgan's new Vogue feature?" My certificate ended up in a drawer. Morgan's photo got the mantle. Some part of me, ridiculous and stubborn, had still hoped they'd burst through these garden doors at the last second, apologizing breathlessly, claiming impossible traffic or a delayed flight. Even now, staring at those empty chairs, a tiny piece of that hope clung on like a loose thread. "Iris." Evan's voice tugged me back. I turned to see him standing behind me in his charcoal suit, blue eyes clouded with concern, and something darker, something like anger he was trying to swallow for my sake. He took my hand, his thumb tracing slow circles over my knuckles. "They're not coming, are they?" I swallowed, forcing my lips into something that might pass as a smile. I felt the edges crack. Let's not keep everyone waiting. The realization that they weren't coming didn't surprise me as much as it should have. I'd spent a lifetime chasing their approval, watching them orbit around Morgan like she was the sun and I was some extra planet that came with the package. Maybe, I thought, if I was perfect today, they'd see me. Maybe if I got married in a beautiful garden, with a good man, with the kind of life stability they bragged about at parties, I'd finally be in the picture. I knew better, but knowing better doesn't stop the wanting. Evan's father appeared beside us, his boutonniere matching the roses in the garden. His eyes flicked once to the empty chairs, then back to me. There was no pity there, just a quiet understanding that almost undid me. "Everything's ready when you are," he said softly. I nodded. Evan squeezed my hand and then walked down the aisle to take his place at the altar. Mrs. Rhodes glided over, her perfume a soft echo of yesterday's whirlwind of flowers and catering and last-minute details she'd handled, as if my happiness personally mattered to her. She reached up and adjusted a single bloom in my hair, her touch gentle. "You look beautiful, Iris," she whispered, her gaze steady on mine. "Truly beautiful." For a moment, I let myself lean into her warmth. This woman had rearranged her whole week to help with final preparations, asked about my favorite desserts, and insisted on including my favorite low-key song in the reception playlist. She had never once mentioned my parents not being there. She just filled in the gap without making me feel the shape of it. The wedding march began. The garden doors swung open. All 120 guests stood, turning to look at me as I stepped through alone. No father offering his arm. No mother dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief. Just me and the sound of my own heartbeat and the feel of the dress swishing around my legs. But at the end of the aisle, there was Evan, waiting with a smile that had always made me feel like I wasn't lost, but found. The ceremony passed in fragments. The vows, the soft quaver in Evan's voice, the way his hands were steady when mine weren't, the gentle laughter when he mispronounced one of the scripted lines and squeezed my fingers like a secret apology. Applause crashed around us when we were pronounced husband and wife. His kiss tasted like relief and promise and something steady I had never trusted family to be. We turned to face our guests. The empty chairs didn't vanish, but they blurred at the edges. The reception started. Glasses clinked, music played, the scent of roasted chicken and garlic butter drifted through the air. For brief stretches, I managed to forget about the two empty chairs in the front row. I laughed, I danced with friends, I spun under the fairy lights while someone's aunt shouted, "Spin the bride!" Then the DJ's voice came through the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for the father-daughter dance." My body froze. The champagne flute paused halfway to my lips. The room hushed as the spotlight drifted across the floor, searching for something that wasn't there. For a heartbeat, the silence felt like a judgment. Then Evan's father stepped forward. "May I have this honor, Iris?" he asked, extending his hand. The kindness in his eyes nearly broke me. I placed my hand in his and let him lead me to the center of the floor. As the music started, I felt 100 eyes on us, some damp with sympathy, some soft with approval, a few sharp with curiosity. "Thank you," I whispered. "Family isn't always blood," he said simply. "Sometimes it's the ones who show up." The words landed somewhere deep inside me, in a place that had been empty for a long time. I tucked them away, not knowing yet how much I would need them. The reception blurred again. Cake cutting, toasts, laughter. For a little while, I allowed myself to believe that the worst part was behind me. Then I felt my phone buzzing in the hidden pocket of my dress. I slipped away to the corridor behind the reception hall and pulled it out. 3 messages from Morgan. The most recent one read, "Mom and Dad are devastated you didn't make sure they got invitations. How could you forget your own parents?" My stomach dropped, cold and heavy. I stared at the screen. I had sent their invitations myself. Physical envelopes, addressed in my neatest handwriting, tracked every step of the way. Digital invitations, confirmed delivered, and opened weeks before the wedding. I had triple-checked because I knew how this would go if anything went wrong. I scrolled up. "You really hurt them, Iris." "They're embarrassed. You put them in a terrible position." Something in me went very still. They were lying, not just misremembering or confused. This was deliberate. A flicker of memory surfaced. Mom, on the phone, weeks earlier, her voice breezy as she said she'd have to check their calendar because Morgan had a lot of exciting opportunities coming up. Dad sending a short reply, "Thanks for letting us know," to my initial email invite. The silence that followed as the date approached. This wasn't an accident. This was a choice. I slipped my phone back into my pocket and went out to the reception, my smile thinner, my laughter a little more hollow around the edges. I heard snippets of other people's conversations as I walked past. "Remember Iris's graduation? They left early because Morgan had that call back." Carol and Daniel care more about appearances than relationships. Poor girl. Imagine not showing up to your daughter's wedding. Evan's hand found mine, his thumb tracing those same slow circles he'd drawn before the ceremony. "Ready to get out of here?" he asked quietly, tilting his head toward the exit where our getaway car waited. I looked around at the fairy lights, at the Rhodes family laughing near the dessert table, at my friends dancing in a loose circle, at the empty spaces where my parents should have been. Something inside me shifted, like a gear finally clicking into place. "Yes," I said, "I'm ready." As we ran through a shower of rose petals, I made a silent promise to myself. This was the last time I would wait for people who never planned to show up. 2 weeks later, the Maui sun and ocean breeze were just memories as I stood in our Seattle kitchen, phone in hand. The honeymoon glow had faded faster than my tan. The apartment felt too quiet, the walls lined with fresh wedding photos Evan had insisted on hanging. 3 weeks of silence from my parents since the wedding. No call, no text, nothing. I finally dialed their number. Mom answered. "You forgot to invite us," she said without so much as a hello. Her tone was cold, practiced. "We never got the invitation, Iris." My hand tightened around the phone. "That's not true. I sent both email and physical invitations. I have the receipts." "Don't be dramatic," she sighed, switching to that familiar, dismissive softness that made me feel 12 years old again. I crossed to the counter, opened my laptop, and pulled up my email account. The cursor blinked in the search bar, impatient. I typed my mother's address. There it was. The invitation labeled opened March 12th, 9:47 a.m. Dad's reply sat beneath it. "I'm looking at the receipt right now," I said, forcing my voice to stay calm. The email was delivered and opened, Dad even replied. "And the tracking for the physical invitation shows it was delivered to your mailbox on March 10th. Silence. "Well, sometimes those systems make mistakes," she said finally, hedging. Maybe we didn't feel welcome. You know how busy we are with Morgan's career taking off? Maybe you didn't make it clear how important it was. There it was, the twist, the quiet rearranging of blame until I was the one holding it. You're always so dramatic. You always upset everyone. You never think about the bigger picture. The realization hit me like a thunderclap. They weren't confused. They weren't hurt because I'd forgotten them. They had chosen not to come. And now they were rewriting the story so I'd be the villain in it. I have to go, I said quietly, before she could stack more words on top of me. I hung up and stared at the laptop screen. Lines of text blurred for a moment, then sharpened. Evan came in, set a mug of tea beside me, and knelt so he could see my face. "What do you need?" he asked. Not what's wrong, not what did they say, just that. What do you need? I need to stop pretending they care about my happiness, I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. He nodded. No speeches, no fixes, just presence. I opened a new document. The empty page glowed, waiting. My fingers hovered over the keys. I'm making a record, I said aloud, mostly to myself, of everything. Invitation receipts, tracking numbers, text messages, emails, dates, times. Line by line, I began to type, building a timeline of what had really happened. Not the version they'd tell at family gatherings. The truth. My phone buzzed on the table beside me, vibrating insistently against the wood. For the first time in my life, I let it ring until the screen went dark, my hands still moving steadily over the keys. I sat there, the glow from my laptop screen washing over the kitchen counter like a cold morning light. The cursor blinked patiently, as if waiting for me to decide whether I was ready to see everything laid out plainly. I started typing again, fingers trembling only a little now. Each line I added felt like laying down bricks, solid, undeniable, factual. It wasn't for them, it was for me. I needed to see the truth in front of me, instead of tangled in my head where guilt could warp it into something unrecognizable. Evan returned with a fresh mug of tea, the steam curling upward like a soft, grounding breath. I took it gently from him. Thanks. He sat beside me, close enough that I felt the heat of his presence, not crowding me, not telling me what to do, just letting me exist without having to defend myself. As I typed, I found old text threads with my parents with new eyes, messages where my mother brushed off my job interviews or redirected conversations back to Morgan's modeling gigs, or subtly suggested I was overreacting whenever I tried to talk about something meaningful. I realized I'd grown so used to minimizing myself that I barely felt the sting anymore. It was muscle memory. But now, with proof in front of me, something inside my chest cracked open. Iris, Evan's voice was soft. I looked up. He pointed to the screen. You're shaking. I hadn't noticed. I placed my palms flat on the counter and breathed out slowly until my fingers were still again. I'm okay. I want to finish this. He nodded once, then leaned his shoulder against mine in quiet solidarity. An hour later, I attached the screenshots, the receipts, the text logs, the delivery confirmations. Then I wrote a short, calm message to my parents. Mom and Dad, I've attached documentation showing that you received both electronic and physical invitations to our wedding. You chose not to come. I won't pretend otherwise. I hope we can move forward honestly, if that's what you want. Iris. No accusations, no anger, just the truth. My hand hovered over the send button. I inhaled, exhaled, and clicked. The message disappeared. I waited for the adrenaline spike, the regret, the frantic desire to explain myself. None came. Instead, I felt a quiet, unexpected stillness. 10 minutes later, my phone lit up. I didn't recognize the number. Iris? Mrs. Rhodes's voice spilled through the speaker before I could say hello. My stomach dropped. Hi, is everything okay? It will be, she said, a note of firmness threading through her gentle tone. Morgan forwarded me your message to your parents. Thought I'd be horrified. A brief, incredulous laugh. Instead, I wanted to tell you, I'm proud of you. I blinked. Proud? Why? For standing up for yourself, she said simply. Some families mistake silence for harmony, but it takes strength to break a pattern. I just wanted you to hear that from someone who sees you clearly. The words landed with more weight than I expected. It felt like someone placing a warm blanket around my shoulders. Thank you, I whispered. When I hung up, Evan was watching me with quiet curiosity. Good call? Yeah, I said, still absorbing the warmth of her words. Really good. For the first time in hours, I closed my laptop. 2 days later, everything exploded. I was at work, reviewing a segment of code with 2 interns. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, and the office buzzed with the usual Monday energy. My phone vibrated relentlessly beside me, but I ignored it until it wouldn't stop. When I finally checked, my stomach clenched. 6 missed calls, 3 voicemails, 14 messages from Mom, Dad, Morgan, and 2 of my aunts. I opened the first one. Mom, Iris, how could you? You blindsided us with that email. After everything we've done for you. Another. Dad. You need to retract that immediately. Your mother is distraught. Then Morgan's. You love drama more than honesty. You're ruining the family image. Fix this. I read each message twice, slowly, like decoding something in a foreign language. Drama. Image. Fix this. Not one word about the truth. A familiar pressure built behind my ribs, but it didn't feel like panic this time. It felt like recognition, like seeing a blueprint I'd memorized through years of repetition. At lunch, my coworker Jess approached hesitantly. Everything okay? You look, I don't know, far away. Family stuff, I said, stirring my soup, though I didn't plan to eat it. They're upset I didn't accept their version of events. She sat down across from me, concern knitting her brows. That sounds hard. I stared at my hands for a moment, then forced a thin smile. It is, but I paused. I think I'm done letting them decide what's real. Her expression softened. Good. That night, when I walked into our apartment, Evan was already home. The moment he saw my face, something in his jaw tightened. They called me, he said, opening his laptop to show me an email. Your dad thinks I should convince you to support family unity. I scanned the message. Every word dripped with subtle guilt. Phrases like, as her husband, you should guide her, and this is tearing the family apart. I felt my stomach twist, not from pain, but from nausea at the manipulation. They're escalating, I whispered, because they know you're not playing along anymore. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered without thinking. Iris, it's Morgan. You blocked me, so I used Ryan's phone. Stop being childish. You're embarrassing all of us. I hung up. She called again and again. Each call from a different number, like a hydra sprouting new heads every time one was cut off. Finally, I turned my phone off. A silence settled over the apartment like a warm blanket. Evan wrapped an arm around me from behind, pressing a kiss to the top of my head. What do you need? The question grounded me. I leaned back into him. Distance. Done, he murmured. By the end of the week, the situation had spread like wildfire through the family. My Aunt Marie called, breathless. Your mother told me you forgot to invite them, she said. She was in tears. I didn't know what to believe. I opened my laptop and calmly explained that I had the receipts. Do you want to see them? There was a sharp inhale on the other end. Yes, send them. 5 minutes later, she called back. Her voice sounded tight, shaken. Iris, they told us a completely different story. I know, I said quietly. They told everyone. A pause, heavy and full of something like guilt. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I believed her, and somehow that small thread of truth from someone in my bloodline held more weight than any apology my parents had ever offered. That night, as Evan and I ate dinner on the couch, I stared at the TV without really watching it. They're calling everyone, I said softly, trying to control the narrative. And? Evan asked gently. And it's not working. For the first time in 32 years, the truth wasn't the part I had to prove. It was the part that was finally visible. The next morning, sunlight spilled across our living room floor in thin, pale streaks. I stood barefoot near the window, staring at the city waking up beyond the glass. Delivery trucks rumbled down the street. Someone jogged by with a dog, tugging impatiently at the leash. And for a moment, life looked beautifully ordinary. My phone buzzed on the dining table behind me. I didn't turn around. I already knew who it was. Morgan. Even without looking, I could picture the frantic punctuation, the clipped phrasing, the urgent demand that I fix the mess she swore I'd created. Evan padded into the room, still drowsy, hair mussed from sleep. He wrapped an arm around my waist from behind and rested his chin on my shoulder. You're quiet, he murmured. Just thinking. About your family? My silence was answer enough. Evan pressed a soft kiss to my temple. I'm here, whatever you need. I nodded, leaning into him briefly. For once, his steadiness didn't make me feel guilty for being shaken. It made me feel anchored, safe. But safety had a strange side effect, clarity. And clarity was starting to illuminate parts of my childhood I hadn't examined closely enough. Mid-morning, as I settled into my cubicle at the software firm, I opened my email and froze. A message from my supervisor, Jared. Subject, Henderson Project. Proposal review. My stomach twisted. Was this about yesterday's tension? My mind flipped through possibilities. Maybe the quality of my work slipped because I had spent half the day fighting off family calls. Maybe I'd overlooked something vital in the code review. I clicked the message. Jared's calm, no-nonsense email filled the screen. The executive team was impressed with your security solutions. We'd like you to lead the next phase. 15% compensation bump. The breath I didn't realize I was holding spilled out slowly. A warmth bloomed in my chest, a feeling that caught me off guard. Pride. Not the fragile kind that dissolves under scrutiny. The real kind. The earned kind. When I looked up, Jess was passing by and paused when she saw my expression. Good news? I nodded. Promotion. Her grin widened. Yes, Iris, that's amazing. You deserve it. The words landed differently from anything my mother had ever said. There was no caveat, no comparison, no, but Morgan is just genuine happiness for me. I let that sink in. Maybe the problem had never been me. Maybe it was who I kept trying to prove myself to. By lunchtime, my phone had 19 unread messages, most variations of the same script. Your mother is crying. You misunderstood. You need to fix this before Morgan's wedding. A few relatives had sent long paragraphs urging me to keep the family together or take the high road, which was code for pretend their version is true. But then a new message arrived from Aunt Marie. Iris, I wanted to let you know people are starting to talk. The truth is coming out. I'm sorry it took me so long to see it. Her message washed over me like warm water. One voice of honesty in a sea of manipulation. One person who looked at the facts and chose truth. I typed back, thank you. And for the first time, I meant it without hesitation. When I got home that evening, Evan was at the stove stirring pasta. The kitchen smelled like garlic and basil, comforting and real. He turned when he heard me drop my bag by the door. How are you holding up? I leaned against the counter, exhaling. Better than yesterday. Worse than I want to admit. Progress, he said lightly. I smiled faintly. Jared gave me the promotion. Evan's face lit up. See? Told you. He crossed the kitchen in 3 strides, wrapped his arms around me, lifted me slightly off the ground, and spun me once. For the record, he said, setting me down gently, I'm proud of you, for all of it. The work, the boundaries, everything. His words hit deeper than he knew. Because when I was a kid, pride was rationed like a luxury item in my parents' house, always reserved for Morgan's achievements, her milestones, her polished perfection. I learned early to shrink my shine so hers could glow uninterrupted. But standing here, being celebrated without condition, something inside me realigned. After dinner, I opened my laptop again, not to respond to my family, but to continue the timeline. I wanted a complete record, not for revenge, but for my own clarity. 14 attempts to contact them before the wedding, email receipts, delivery confirmations, screenshots of unanswered messages. I read the line where my mother said, maybe we didn't feel welcome, and felt the calm certainty of truth rising in me like a tide. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't forgetful. I wasn't dramatic. I wasn't the villain. For once, the facts matched what my heart had always suspected. You're quiet, Evan said, sitting beside me with 2 mugs of tea. I'm thinking about sending this to the whole family, I admitted. Not to convince them, he guessed, but to set the record straight. I nodded. If they're going to form opinions, I want them to have the facts. Evan set his hand over mine. Then do it. I exhaled slowly. Okay. It was time. I created a new email addressed to every relative who had contacted me recently. Aunts, uncles, cousins, even a few family friends who had chimed in with passive-aggressive, I hope you can come together during this special time messages. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I didn't write a speech. I didn't defend myself. I didn't attack anyone. I simply attached the evidence. All of it. Then I typed, for those asking about the situation, I've attached documentation regarding my parents' invitations to our wedding. This is simply the factual record. I will not be attending Morgan's wedding. I wish her well. Iris. I stared at the screen, at the tiny blue paperclip icon showing 12 attachments, at the cursor blinking like a heartbeat. Then I pressed send. The email whooshed away like an arrow loosed from a bowstring. No turning back, no hiding, no shrinking. I sat there in the dimly lit living room, listening to the quiet hum of the refrigerator, the distant sound of cars on the street, Evan's soft breathing next to me. And then my phone lit up, and lit up, and lit up again. Message after message flooding in like a dam breaking. Evan placed his hand on my knee. You don't have to look yet, he reminded me. He was right, I didn't. But I wanted to. For the first time in my life, I wanted to see how the truth shifted the ground beneath all of them. I picked up my phone, took a breath, and opened the first message. The first notification came from Aunt Lisa. I had no idea, Iris. Your mother told us a completely different story. I'm so sorry. Another followed seconds later from Uncle Jim. We won't be going to Morgan's wedding after what we just read. They owe you an apology. Then a cousin I rarely spoke to. Your parents have been lying to everyone. Unbelievable. The messages kept coming, piling onto the lock screen so fast my phone vibrated uncontrollably. I set it on the coffee table as if it were a hot pan. The whole apartment seemed to hum with the sheer volume of truth suddenly unleashed. Evan leaned back on the couch beside me, one arm draped across the backrest. They read it. They're responding, I murmured, dazed. You okay? I wasn't sure, but the heaviness I'd carried for months felt lighter. Like a door had opened somewhere inside my chest and air was moving through a space long sealed shut. I think so, I said finally. I think I feel relief. A new message pinged. Aunt Marie this time. Iris, I confronted your mother. She doubled down. She swore you never sent anything, even when I told her I saw the receipts with my own eyes. I let out a long sigh. Evan reached over, took the phone from my hand, and turned it face down. You don't have to read all of them tonight. But I did. Not out of masochism, but because for the first time in my life, people were seeing the truth. And something deep inside me, a wound years in the making, needed that. The next morning, I woke to a phone still buzzing on my dresser. 23 new messages, 5 missed calls, 2 voicemails. I stared at the screen in the dim light, feeling strangely calm. I didn't open any of them. Instead, I got dressed, made coffee, kissed Evan goodbye, and went to work. At my desk, Jared walked by and tapped the wall of my cubicle. Ready to review the Phase 2 security specs this week? Yes, I said with a clarity that surprised both of us. Absolutely. The Henderson project was complicated, layered, intricate, with dozens of tiny vulnerabilities that needed addressing. Coding had always soothed me, but today it was like therapy, logic, order, systems that made sense when tested. I dove in. By noon, my phone buzzed again. I didn't look. That in itself felt like a small revolution. Jess walked over with 2 coffees. Truce? She teased, holding one out. I smiled. I wasn't aware we were at war. Your inbox looked like a battlefield yesterday. I laughed despite myself. Still does. She studied me for a beat. You seem different. Different how? Centered, she said slowly. Grounded. I blinked. Really? Yeah, she said, surprised I didn't see it. It's like you finally stopped carrying something heavy. The words sank deep. Maybe I had. That evening, when I got home, Evan was already waiting at the kitchen counter. A manila envelope sat in front of him. This came today, he said, from your father's law firm. My stomach tightened. What now? He slid it toward me. I opened it and pulled out a letter, printed on heavy, cream-colored paper. The kind usually reserved for settlement agreements or holiday cards from people who barely know you. Iris, your continued silence is unacceptable. As your father, I demand you meet with us in person. Whatever imagined slight you believe occurred does not justify the division you're causing. Your behavior has negatively affected Morgan's wedding. As her sister, it is your responsibility to support this family. We expect to hear from you within the week. Dad. My mouth went dry. Evan snorted. Imagined slight? Really? They're panicking, I said quietly. Losing control. He nodded. Because their version doesn't hold when the receipts come out. I placed the letter back in the envelope, the paper suddenly feeling cheap despite its thickness. I'm not responding. Evan's voice softened. Good. I wasn't done justifying myself. I was done participating. 2 days later, my phone buzzed with a message from Aunt Marie again. I wanted you to know, half of the extended family has canceled on Morgan's wedding. They're furious at your parents for lying. It's causing chaos. I sat on the couch, watching Seattle's evening lights blink across the sound. A strange quiet settled over me, a calmness I hadn't felt in years. Want to see something? Evan asked. He sat beside me and pulled up a series of photos he'd taken at dinner the other night. Me laughing with his parents, me leaning into him while his father told some dramatic story about his youth, me placing a hand on Mrs. Rhodes's shoulder as we set the table. You look happy, Evan said softly. I swallowed. I am. It hit me then. The way his family supported me wasn't loud or flashy. It was consistent, present, safe. I'd spent so long trying to earn crumbs of acceptance from people who only valued me when I was silent and useful. But here, with the Rhodes family, I didn't have to shrink to fit. On Thursday morning, a courier knocked on our door. I opened it to find an envelope embroidered with gold foil. Morgan's handwriting scrawled across the front. Evan came to my side as I tore it open. A check for $2,000 fluttered into my hands. The note read, "For your dress and travel, Mom and Dad will tell everyone you had scheduling conflicts. Please just show up and smile. For the family image. M." My breath stilled. Not an apology, not accountability, a bribe. Evan's face darkened. Are they serious? I stared at the check, feeling something click inside me, a metallic, final sound, like the tumblers of a lock sliding into place. They don't want me, I said quietly. They want the illusion of me. Evan took my hand. So what do you want to do? I didn't hesitate. Return it. That night, I drafted a short note on my stationery. My presence is not for sale. Iris. I placed the uncashed check inside, sealed the envelope, and handed it to Evan. He dropped it into a mailbox under a street lamp that painted everything gold. When he returned to me, he took my hand and squeezed gently. How do you feel? I exhaled slowly, free. He kissed the side of my head. Good. Aunt Marie called again the next morning. Iris, your mother is furious. She's blaming your father for letting it get this far. Morgan is screaming at them for ruining her wedding plans. The whole house is falling apart. I closed my eyes, listened. For the first time, I didn't feel guilt, or sadness, or bitterness. Just clarity. Are you still going to the wedding? I asked. No, honey, she said. Some things are more important than keeping up appearances. Her voice softened. I should have learned that a long time ago. I hung up the phone and stared around our apartment. The soft light, the photos of Evan's family, the framed shots from our own wedding, the life we were building. For so long, I thought I needed my parents' approval to feel whole. But the truth, I had already built wholeness without them. I just hadn't realized it yet. 3 days before Morgan's wedding, an invitation sat on my kitchen counter, its gold embossed lettering catching the morning light as if trying to draw attention to itself. I stared at it while waiting for my coffee to brew, feeling nothing but a strange, hollow detachment. No nervousness, no guilt, no internal tug of war. Just nothing. My phone buzzed again. Carol's third message that morning. Iris, please. Just show up. We'll forget everything that happened. Morgan deserves her sister there. I picked up the phone and turned it face down without opening it. The desperation in her words was almost theatrical, as though she was reciting lines from a script she believed would sway me. As though saying family enough times would make the years of neglect vanish. The knock on my door startled me. When I opened it, a courier stood holding an envelope with the return address of my father's law firm. My stomach tightened, but this time it wasn't fear, just irritation. I signed for it and tore it open right in the doorway. Iris, consider how family connections benefit your career. The tech industry values networking. Morgan's fiancé's family has connections that could help you advance. Burning bridges now could have long-term consequences. A threat, thinly veiled but unmistakable. Evan looked up from the couch when he heard the envelope crumple in my hand. Another letter? A warning, I said flatly. They're trying everything. He stood, crossed the room, and pulled me gently into his arms. His warmth seeped through me as he said against my hair, "You're not going back." It wasn't a question. It was a truth he saw in me before I fully recognized it myself. I nodded, exhaling into his shoulder. No, I'm not. 2 nights before the wedding, I found myself awake at 2 a.m., scrolling through old family photos scattered across my desk. In picture after picture, Morgan shone at center stage, blowing out candles, posing with trophies, beaming beneath spotlights. And me, always somewhere on the edge, half cropped out, half seen, half important. At my college graduation, my parents had left early because Morgan had a modeling callback. At my first job offer, they cut me off mid-celebration to show me her latest magazine spread. At family holidays, my accomplishments were footnotes. Hers were headlines. Why had I tolerated it for so long? Maybe because I was raised to believe love was conditional, earned, performative, a competition I never signed up for yet kept trying to win. Are you being too harsh? I whispered into the quiet room, half expecting no answer. But Evan appeared in the doorway, rubbing sleep from his eyes. Harsh? He said. Iris. They skipped our wedding, one of the most important days of your life. When he walked toward me, he picked up one of the photos from my desk, a picture of our ceremony, the two empty chairs visible in the background. They made choices, he said gently. Not mistakes, choices. I bit my lip. I know, it's just, I've spent my whole life putting their feelings first. At the cost of your dignity, he replied softly. His words struck like a quiet truth-telling bell, a resonance I couldn't ignore. I closed the photo album, walked to my laptop, and opened the timeline I'd been creating. Hundreds of lines, clear evidence, a full record of reality, undeniable, unemotional, complete. I added one last update, attempted bribe to attend Morgan's wedding, $2,000 check delivered on date. Then I drafted a new email, not to Mom or Dad or Morgan, but to every extended family member who'd reached out, pressured me, questioned me, or tried to guilt me into compliance. I attached the entire record, the receipts, the delivery confirmations, the emails, the messages. My email was simple. To my extended family, there seems to be confusion regarding my absence from Morgan's wedding. I've attached documentation of all communication attempts and invitations related to my own wedding. I will not be attending. This isn't about punishment. It's about consequences for choices made. I wish Morgan a beautiful day. Iris. I hit send, and then I closed the laptop with a sense of finality that felt like placing the last stone on a long overdue grave. On the morning of Morgan's wedding, Evan and I drove toward Olympic National Park. The sky was a soft silver blue, clouds brushing the mountains like watercolor strokes. Midway up Hurricane Ridge, my phone, my new phone, whose number my parents didn't have, buzzed. A text from a number saved under Aunt Ruth. The message contained a single photo, Morgan's reception. Half the tables were empty, whole branches of the family missing. Only a scattering of guests remained, seated far apart, their expressions tense. Below it, Ruth had written, "Your mother is furious. Half the family didn't show up. They say they never got invitations. Sound familiar?" I didn't feel vindication, no triumphant surge, no satisfaction in their unraveling. Just quiet, clean relief. Finally, a reflection of their own behavior mirrored back at them. Finally, other people seeing what I'd lived with for years. Finally, no more pretending. The world didn't collapse, but their facade did. Evan touched my arm. You okay? I watched the mountains stretch out before us, ridges layered like folded fabric. The wind smelled like pine and snow and possibility. Yes, I said. For the first time, I think I'm okay. 2 years later, our home in Olympia was warm with the late afternoon sun. My 6-month-old son slept against my chest, his small breaths feathering the skin beneath my collarbone. His tiny fingers curled around the edge of my shirt with unquestioning trust. Evan sat cross-legged on the floor, sorting through photos for the baby album. Mrs. Rhodes, now simply Mom to me, was coming over the next day. She'd promised to bring apple pie and insisted she had grandmother rights to spoil him. This one's my favorite, Evan said, holding up a photo of his mother cradling our son, her eyes glowing with love, so deep and real it nearly made my throat tighten. That's going in the album, I said softly. The walls around us were filled with pictures. Evan's parents, our friends, our support group, the people who showed up, the people who loved without conditions. No portraits of Carol or Daniel, no shadows of Morgan's perfect smile. None were missed. My phone buzzed. An unknown number. I know you had a son. You cannot be this cruel. You cannot keep a grandchild from his grandmother. Call me, Iris. Carol. 2 years ago, these words would have shattered me. Now, they barely grazed the surface. Evan lifted his head. Your mother? I nodded once, showing him the message. Same tactics, same desperation, same script. But I wasn't an actress in that play anymore. I hovered my thumb over the block button, paused only for a heartbeat, not from doubt, but from acknowledging how far I'd come. Then I pressed it. Simple, clean, final. I set the phone aside, leaned down, and pressed a kiss to my son's forehead. His warmth settled into my soul like something sacred. When I looked up, Evan was watching me with quiet pride. You okay? He asked. I nodded. Better than okay. He smiled, the kind that communicated whole paragraphs without a single word. Our sun shifted, nestling deeper between us. We sat together, wrapped in the soft glow of evening light, surrounded by a life we built on truth instead of performance, on presence instead of appearance, on love instead of obligation. This was family, not the one I was born into, the one I chose, the one that chose me back. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for people who never planned to show up. I was exactly where I needed to be, free, whole, and finally home.